Well, today is Tuesday of Holy Week. Like yesterday, this day doesn't have an official name, but most of the events of this day concern confrontations Jesus has with the religious leaders who are seeking to trap him by putting him to the test. And so I'm calling this day Testing Tuesday. Jesus will be put to the test to see if indeed he is a prophet sent from God. Still outraged by Jesus' cleansing of the temple, the religious leaders first challenged Jesus as to what authority he had to do such a thing. In his reply, Jesus instead traps them by exposing their ignorance and not even knowing whether John the Baptist was a prophet sent from God. Thus, how could they judge whether Jesus is? Jesus follows this up with 3 extended parables showing God's judgment coming upon these leaders for not encouraging the people to accept Jesus' invitation into his kingdom. The first parable is of 2 sons, and this parable shows the religious leaders' failure to live up to their talk, while instead sinners who have repented are now following Jesus. The second parable of the wicked tenants shows that God is taking away the kingdom from these religious leaders, and he is offering it to others. The treatment of a beloved son in the parable and the rejection that he receives is an unmistakable allusion to the Heavenly Father sending his own divine Son, Jesus, into the world. Although Jesus is a rejected son, he will soon rise to a prominent position of the cornerstone, upon whom God is forming a new people, made up of all who believe in Jesus, Jew and Gentile, namely the church. The third parable of the King's Feast summarizes Israel's history and describes the consequences that will befall Israel's religious leaders. Their invitation will be withdrawn and it will be extended to others. This again anticipates the spread of the gospel to the Gentiles. Having been stung by these indictments, the religious leaders don't stop, but they continue in their effort to try to trap Jesus by asking him a series of 3 questions. The first question concerns taxes, specifically whether it is lawful to pay taxes to Caesar. Now, like today, taxes were a volatile issue. If Jesus says yes, he will lose favor with the people. If he says no, he could be in trouble with Rome. And with no seeming way out, Jesus' answer is as brilliant as it is helpful. Noting the image of Caesar on the coin, he says, "Give to Caesar what is Caesar's." But he doesn't stop there. He goes on to say, "And give to God what is God's." Now, the Bible teaches that all human beings are created in the image of God. We bear his image. So, while Caesar may have some rights to material things that bear his image, God has the far greater right to the whole person, even your eternal soul. As his creation, you belong to him. The second trap they lay concerns the resurrection. They present this absurd hypothetical story about a woman who has been married and widowed consecutively to 7 brothers. The story is designed to try and make the resurrection look like a ridiculous notion. But again, Jesus turns the tables on them, noting that they not only do not understand the scriptures, which clearly teach the resurrection, they don't understand the power of God, who is able to establish relationships of even deeper friendship, joy, and love in the life to come than even what marriage offers us now. Finally, a third questioner approaches Jesus and asks him about which of God's commands is the greatest. Jesus responds by quoting Deuteronomy 6 and Leviticus 19, calling on love for God and love of one's neighbor. But there is a priority in the two commands. Love for God always precedes and empowers our love for our neighbor. Having evaded these traps, Jesus now goes on the offensive. He questions the questioners, and his question is about the long-awaited Messiah. Using Psalm 110, Jesus challenges them to explain how the promised Messiah can be both David's descendant and thus of lesser rank than David, and yet also his Lord, thus of greater rank than David. These so-called biblical experts of the day are at a loss for words or any answer. Of course, we know the answer, of course, lies in who Jesus is. He is the God-man. With respect to his humanity, he is descended from David. But with respect to his divinity, he is also David's creator and Lord. The scriptures say that from this point on, no one dared to ask him any more questions to test him. For his part, Jesus has proven that he is full of wisdom and is indeed a prophet sent from God. And in keeping with this prophetic role, Jesus will go on to issue a series of scathing pronouncements, 7 pronouncements of judgment concerning the religious leaders. And then as the day draws to a close, Jesus also prophesies to his disciples concerning events that are soon to take place, including the soon coming destruction of the temple. But then he goes on to prophesy of even more distant events that will usher in the second coming of the Lord. Now, as these first 3 days of Holy Week come to a close, we see Jesus fulfilling all 3 roles by which God relates to his people. He is God's chosen king. He is God's chosen priest. And he is God's chosen prophet. So far, this lamb, selected for sacrifice by God himself, is proving to be spotless. Not everyone, of course, believes this. The religious leaders certainly do not. But there's one, even more close to Jesus, also doesn't believe it.